The night I discovered my father's second family began with a simple lie, delivered with the casual confidence of a man who'd told it 1,000 times before. I was 26 and 3 weeks into moving back into my parents' house after a bad breakup. My stuff was still in half-open boxes in my old room, the mattress on the floor like a reminder that none of this was supposed to be permanent. I kept telling myself I was here to reset, save money, figure out my next step. The truth was, I felt stranded. He left his phone on the kitchen counter, an uncharacteristic oversight for a man so meticulous. I was getting a glass of water when it buzzed, the vibration a sharp, intrusive sound in the silent house. I didn't mean to look. I honestly didn't. But the screen lit up, illuminating the darkened kitchen, and a name flashed in the notification banner that made me freeze. Anna, followed by a small red heart. Curiosity, powerful and treacherous, won a swift victory over my better judgment. With trembling fingers, I picked up the phone. The messages weren't flirtatious or passionate in the way you'd expect from a simple affair. They were alarmingly, devastatingly domestic. Jason wants to know if you're coming to his game tomorrow. Love you. Drive safe. Jason, my own middle name. The coincidence was a cold spike of dread in my gut. My heart started pounding, a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. My hands shook so badly I had to brace my wrist with my other hand to steady the phone, my thumbs swiping erratically past message after message, a timeline of a life I knew nothing about. I saw pictures of a boy, maybe 12 years old, with my father's eyes and a smile that was all his own. There was a woman I had never seen before, her arm draped casually around my father's shoulders. There were photos of a different house, one with blue shutters and a sprawling oak tree in the front yard. There were birthday parties, school plays, and family vacations to a beach I didn't recognize. And my father, my own father, was in all of them, his face relaxed and unguarded in a way I hadn't seen in years. He wasn't just having an affair. He was living an entirely separate, parallel life. That night, I sat at the kitchen table for hours, watching the rain streak down the window pane, coming to the slow, horrifying realization that the man I had admired my whole life was a complete stranger to me. And the worst part, the question that echoed in the suffocating silence, was that I had no idea why. To understand the depth of my shock, you have to understand the man my father, David, was, or the man I believed him to be. He was the kind of man who commanded respect without ever raising his voice. He spoke with a calm, controlled authority that made people lean in and listen. He wasn't loud or aggressive. He was simply certain, a pillar of stability in our lives. As an engineer, he approached the world with precision and logic. Every screw in our house had to be turned so the slot was vertical. Every family trip had a detailed itinerary. Every plan had a backup. I would later realize that every lie he told was constructed with the same meticulous, unwavering care. To me, he was a hero. He coached my little league team, patiently teaching me how to stand in the batter's box. He taught me how to drive, his hands steady on the dashboard as I nervously navigated our neighborhood streets. He helped me with my college applications, proofreading my essays with the same focus he applied to his engineering blueprints. There were, of course, times he would miss dinner because of late meetings, but my mother never seemed to question it. She would just smile, a little tiredly, and reheat his plate when he finally walked through the door after midnight. I remember one evening distinctly, when I was 16. I found my mother in the laundry room, folding his work shirts. I saw a strange, fleeting expression on her face, a look of profound, quiet sadness, as if she was holding on to a secret too heavy to carry but too dangerous to set down. When I asked if she was okay, she smoothed a collar and forced a smile. "Your dad works so hard for us, that's all," she replied, her voice just a little too bright. Looking back, the clues were scattered throughout my entire life. The faint, unfamiliar floral scent on his jacket when he came home late. The spare phone charger he kept in his car, even though his personal and work phones used the same cable. The holidays where he suddenly had to travel for work, leaving my mother and me to celebrate alone. I explained it all away, constructing a narrative of a busy, important, successful man who made sacrifices for his family. I wanted to believe it, because considering any other possibility was unbearable. I never imagined he had another home, another child, and a whole other version of himself that he was giving to someone else. My mother had unknowingly built her entire life around a man who was only partially hers. But even then, standing on the precipice of this horrible truth, I didn't know the full story. There was something larger and more calculated beneath the surface, and I was about to uncover it all. Sleep was impossible that night. My mind became a frantic archive, replaying every conversation, every memory, every late meeting, dissecting them for the lies I had so willingly ignored. The next morning, he walked into the kitchen, the picture of normalcy, and poured himself a cup of coffee. I watched every casual movement, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the sound filled the room. "Rough night?" I asked, my voice strained as I tried to sound nonchalant. He gave me the same calm, careful smile that had reassured me my whole life. "Just work, son. Deadlines." Work. It was always work. The word was a shield, a justification for everything. I felt a surge of rage, a primal urge to scream, to throw his phone at him and demand he explain the life I'd seen on its screen. But a colder, more rational voice inside me whispered, "Wait." An explosion now would give him the chance to control the narrative, to twist the story, to lie his way out of it as he had clearly done for years. Instead, I waited for my moment. I knew he used his company laptop for business, so when he went to take a shower, I slipped into his home office. My fingers felt clumsy and foreign on the keyboard as I opened it. I wasn't looking for love letters or incriminating photos. I needed something irrefutable. I found it in a folder labeled Tax Info 2024. Inside were 2 sets of tax forms, 2 separate PDFs, 2 different addresses, and 2 dependents listed, my name and the name Jason Matthews. Matthews. He hadn't even given his other son his own name. He had built a firewall between his 2 lives. That's when the sheer scale of his deception truly hit me. This wasn't a reckless affair. This was a meticulously planned, long-term operation. He was maintaining a completely separate household, parallel to ours. I typed the other address into Google Maps. It was a pleasant-looking house in a quiet suburb, with a clean driveway and welcoming blue shutters. It was a family home. Before I could think twice, before I could let fear and nausea stop me, I was in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white, driving toward the physical proof of his betrayal. I parked across the street, my car a fragile bubble of my own reality. And then I saw her, the woman from the photos, Anna. She opened the front door, and a boy ran out, wrapping his arms around her waist in a spontaneous hug. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, a ghost watching a life that should have been mine. They played in the yard. Jason kicked a soccer ball, and my father, my dad, retrieved it, tossing it back and ruffling the boy's hair. The same affectionate gesture he used to give me when I scored in a childhood soccer game. The memory, once a source of comfort, now felt like a sharp, deliberate cruelty. He wasn't ashamed or hiding. He hadn't run away from a life he hated. He had simply upgraded. Our family was the rough draft he'd quietly discarded for the final, polished version. A tremor started in my hands that I couldn't stop. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached, fighting an overwhelming urge to storm across the street, shatter their perfect scene, and scream at that boy, "He's my dad too." But I remained frozen in my seat, paralyzed by an anger so profound it felt like ice, numbing me from the inside out. The drive home was a blur. When I walked through the door, my mother was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner, the familiar scent of roasting chicken filling the air. She turned and smiled when she saw me, her face alight with innocent warmth. "Hey, honey, you're home early." Her voice, so full of love and ignorance, made me feel physically sick. I was sick at my father for his betrayal, and sick at myself for being the silent keeper of a secret that would destroy her. For days, I existed in a fog. Food tasted like ash, and I'd find myself standing in the middle of a room, unable to remember why I'd walked in. Every time my father tried to speak to me, I'd manufacture an excuse to leave, the sound of his calm voice now feeling like a physical poison. He noticed my sudden distance, of course, but he didn't push, a sign of his own guilt. The silence between us stretched, growing heavy and unbearable with everything left unsaid. Who was this man I had called my father? Did he ever truly love us? Or were we just a placeholder? A comfortable lie he maintained until he found the life he really wanted? The final thread of my denial snapped one night when I overheard him on the phone in the garage. He was whispering, but the concrete walls amplified his words. I heard the murmur of his voice, the low, intimate tone he never used with my mother anymore. And then I heard the words that destroyed any remaining hope I had that this was all a terrible mistake. "I'm sorry, Anna," he said, his voice low and gentle. "I can't come home tonight." In that moment, the grief that had felt like a suffocating fog didn't just break, it crystallized. The paralysis of the past few days sharpened into a single, cold point of resolve. I couldn't sit back and let this secret corrode my family and my own soul from the inside out. If my father was determined to live a double life, then I would be the one to drag both of his lives into the light. I waited until he left for work the next morning. My mom was out running errands, a small blessing that gave me the privacy I needed. I went straight to his office, a room always kept locked, a sanctuary of his secrets. Years ago, I'd seen him hide the key inside an old, leather-bound encyclopedia on the bookshelf, a clever trick he probably thought no one noticed. My fingers closed around the cold metal. The room was neat and orderly, a reflection of his controlled personality. His desk was spotless, except for one drawer that was slightly misaligned. I pulled it open and found a thick manila folder labeled insurance. Inside were dozens of photos, a curated gallery of his other life. There he was with Anna and Jason, at a park, at the beach, even posed for Christmas photos in matching sweaters in front of a tree laden with presents. He looked happier, more genuinely alive, than I had ever seen him. But behind the photos was the true prize, a thick legal document, his life insurance policy, worth $1. $2 million. I scanned the pages until I found the beneficiary designation. Anna Matthews was listed as the primary beneficiary. My mother's name was nowhere on it. That's when I knew what I had to do. This was no longer just about exposing a lie. It was about dismantling a carefully constructed deception designed to erase us. He was preparing to leave us with nothing. With methodical calm, I photographed every document and every picture. I made digital copies of the insurance papers and uploaded everything to a new, encrypted email account. For the first time in weeks, the crushing weight of sadness and rage began to transform into something else, a cold, clear sense of purpose. He had a plan for his future, and now, so did I. For weeks, I let my anger fuel a detailed, methodical plan. I stopped thinking about revenge as a single, explosive act and started seeing it as a chess game, quiet, precise, and irreversible. My anger cooled into a singular focus, and the investigation started where the discovery had, with his laptop. That night, I sifted through saved passwords and financial bookmarks, building a map of his digital life before I began tracing every loose financial thread he had left behind. I called banks, using his personal information, pretending to be clearing up accounting questions on his behalf. I spent hours in stuffy municipal offices, poring over public records, property transfers, insurance amendments, tax filings. I learned how he had split his funds, how he had routed payments through shell accounts to Anna, and how he had strategically left our family with the mortgage and the accumulating debt. Each document was another piece of the map of his betrayal. But I didn't want to ruin him with a messy, emotional confrontation. I wanted to force him to face the consequences of his actions in a way he couldn't deny or escape. So I meticulously organized my evidence. I created a digital dossier for every lie, complete with dates, phone records, photos, the life insurance policy, and bank transfers. I sent encrypted, sealed packages containing copies of everything to 3 key people: a highly respected lawyer specializing in family law and financial fraud, a trusted local journalist known for her investigative work on corruption, and the human resources director at his engineering firm, a woman with a reputation for taking ethical breaches seriously. Finally, I reached out to Anna. We met in a crowded, impersonal coffee shop, neutral ground for the wreckage he had created. A part of me wanted to unleash my fury on her, but when I saw her, she just looked tired and heartbroken. When I laid out the evidence, the 2 sets of tax forms, our family photos, the life insurance policy, her shock was genuine. She had no idea. She thought my father was long divorced and that they were building an honest life together. When she started to cry, her shoulders shaking, I realized our pain was the same shape. "I'm not trying to destroy your life," I told her, my voice softer than I expected. "I just want the truth to be public so it can't be hidden anymore." She nodded, silent, and suddenly an ally in a war she hadn't known she was fighting. I chose a Tuesday for my plan to unfold. It wasn't random. Tuesdays were when the firm released its quarterly results, a slick, tightly controlled event streamed to investors, partners, and the local press. My father loved those calls. He practiced his cadence, his smile, the light warmth of his anecdotes about family values. To him, the earnings call was theater, a place to perform the version of himself that opened doors and won trust. It was the perfect stage for truth. 2 hours before the call, the pieces began to move. The lawyer confirmed the insurance company had received the certified letter and placed a temporary freeze on any payout pending investigation. The HR director texted that she had the files I'd submitted and would be initiating an internal inquiry. The journalist, the one with a reputation for not being afraid of messy human stories, called to say her editor loved the angle and would publish a full expose at the moment the call hit the stream. Timing was everything. I sat in my car across from the glass-fronted building where he worked. The city lights reflected like pinpricks on the windshield. My mother was at home, going over bills with a pen in her hand. Anna and Jason were in the coffee shop down the street, quiet and uncertain, our plan having given them no small courage. I had given the journalist my dossier and asked her for two things: publish the story publicly at the moment the call went live, and push the link into the company's conference chat and social feeds. She did what I hoped. She said it was the only way to make sure the board and the world could not look away. The call began. My father's voice came through the speakers, calm, practiced, polished, praising the company's resilience, thanking investors for their trust. Slides flipped behind him on the broadcast, revenue graphs, quarterly highlights, smiling headshots of the leadership team. Then, exactly 5 minutes in, the journalist's story hit every feed the firm used to broadcast the call. The headline popped like a gunshot across the investor chat. Company chief accused of leading a double life. Life insurance names stranger as primary beneficiary. Evidence suggests years of hidden funds. The link was everywhere. Within seconds, screenshots of the beneficiary pages, tax records, and the messages I'd saved began to ripple through the chat. Someone posted the insurance page with Anna's name circled in red. Someone else posted the photo of Jason, a boy with my father's eyes, tagged with the caption, "Dependent listed on tax forms." The stream froze for a beat, then filled again with stunned emojis, private messages, and an uproar of disbelief. I watched the man I'd grown up with shift on the stage as his words hit him like stones. For the first time in my life, he looked off script. He stumbled over a sentence, then went quiet. Someone in the conference muted his feed. An executive on the other side of the call leaned in, phone already in hand. The HR director logged into the company chat and announced, calmly and without flourish, that the firm had received new information and would be pausing the live call. She said the words that would change everything. "We are initiating an immediate investigation and placing Mr. Davis on administrative leave pending review." The stream cut. The chat exploded. My father's face went white, then angry, then small. He tried to marshal a smile for the cameras, to say it was a misunderstanding, a smear, complicated. But a barrage of internal emails, the ones the HR director had already received from me and the lawyer, had already reached the board. The journalist began calling witnesses. Within an hour, the story had been picked up by a larger outlet. By midday, the local papers ran with it. By evening, it was on talk radio. He called my cell from the parking lot, breathless and thin. "What did you do?" he asked, disbelief and fury braided together. "How could you?" "I showed the world what you were showing me," I said. "You made choices. You built lives. I made it public." "You've ruined me," he said. He sounded older than his years. "No," I said, my voice flat and unfamiliar even to myself. "I just made everything public. The choices were all yours." The lawyer moved faster than I expected. Within days, the insurance company confirmed the freeze. Auditors combed through accounts. The bank flagged transfers. The firm's legal counsel asked for custody of certain documents and froze any compensation changes. People I'd known as peripheral figures in my father's life, accountants, a notary, a contractor who'd worked on the blue-shuttered house, were suddenly witnesses in a story that had once been just mine to carry. The legal battles that followed were ugly and precise. There were depositions and subpoenas and meetings that smelled of coffee and polite fury. My mother's lawyer secured protective orders and access to accounts she'd never known to question. The bank reversed some transfers and blocked others. Anna and I both met with mediators. Not enemies anymore, but co-victims, each defending our own futures while trying to do what was right for Jason. The court hearings were slow and bureaucratic and cold, but they had teeth. The truth, finally public and documented, had leverage. But the thing about truth is that it isn't always clean. It doesn't fix the nights my mother spent staring at the ceiling or the years of holidays that would never be the same. It doesn't give me back the father I'd thought I had. Sometimes it only stops the rot from spreading further. Still, there was a kind of relief in the exposure, a relief that felt like the first breath after a held inhale. My father disappeared for a while. He called sometimes from hotels or borrowed phones, voice frayed, offering apologies that felt like rehearsed scripts. Once, he asked if he could come home. I listened, then put the phone down without an answer. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't something you give because you're expected to. It's something you choose when it no longer harms you to do so. I wasn't ready. My mother, against everything I'd feared, began to rebuild. She worked with financial advisors and a small circle of friends. She found a therapist, and, in the slow, awkward way of healing people, she learned to laugh again. Bills were reorganized. The house stayed, thanks to court orders and careful negotiation. It wasn't the life she'd imagined, but it was a life she could own. Anna fought for her son. She had loved my father honestly and without malice. When she learned the truth about beneficiaries and hidden funds, she felt betrayed in a different shape. Not by a lover she'd expected loyalty from, but by a man who'd made both of their lives a ledger of lies. We became, in the legal sense, uneasy allies. She and I shared notes and witness lists and sometimes coffee. We compared memories to ensure depositions matched. We learned to keep Jason's childhood as untouched as possible amid the noise. I met Jason once, in a small courtroom lobby. He was nervous and polite. He had an undercut like I'd once had. When he looked at me, curious and unassuming, I saw the boy I had been. Gullible in the best ways, hungry for approval. It hurt. It healed. I wasn't sure which feeling predominate. I chose then to be protective, to make space for him as someone who deserved safety, not the legacy of his father's decisions. Months later, the firm issued a statement. My father would not return. The insurance company continued its probe. The courts continued to sort assets and guardianship rights. The public moved on in small waves, but the people who mattered the most, my mother, Anna, Jason, and I, learned to move forward in a way that was quieter, more deliberate. The revenge I had imagined as a roaring collapse turned out to be a careful, lawful unmasking. It wasn't about spectacle. It was about making sure the truth couldn't be brushed aside by charm or spreadsheets. I wanted him accountable, not to humiliate him, but to protect the people he had abandoned. I still miss the father I thought I had. Sometimes the absence hits like a weather front, sudden, gray, and cold. But I no longer carry the secret. I no longer smooth over the cracks to keep the house standing. I helped make the truth public because secrets rot more than hearts ever do. In the end, I learned that justice is a patient thing. It moves slowly and methodically, not painfully swift. It doesn't always fix what's broken, but it prevents the same lies from being told to the next victim. That, in itself, felt like a kind of mercy. Months after the first headlines, sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee that no longer trembled in my hands, my mother looked up and said, quietly, "You did the right thing." I didn't need more than that. It was enough.